lovies, it's David McGillivray here, and this is Little Did You Know. It's a chat show in which I talk to people I find interesting. I hope you agree. Now, how about the posters here for these theatrical productions? Rather impressive, aren't they? And my guest today has been involved in every one of them. Often as a director, sometimes as an actor, and he's a writer too. And because of his connections, he knows everyone. Stars of the calibre of Fenella Fielding and Victor Spinetti have both appeared in my films. And right now we're working on a major motion picture together. It's the long delayed, and when I say long delayed, I mean 50 years, the long delayed film of Robin Maugham's novel, The Wrong People. So we've got a lot to talk about. And are you there, Peter Benedict? Oh my goodness, what's going on?
Hello.
Oh, I didn't expect that.
As if.
Oh, how lovely. Although I should have known, because you're noted for your hospitality, Peter.
Am I really?
What, your parties, they're celebrated.
Celebrated and occasionally prosecuted. Look at the way I've laid this tea tray out just for you.
Yes,
I
please.
was taught at drama school, the Webber Douglas, by a very famous acting teacher called Hilary Wood. And she taught us how to lay out a tea tray. Now, this may sound ludicrous, but she said you must never on stage, if the assistant stage manager hasn't done it properly, let it go, because audiences will think it's strange if things appear from behind other things. So always lay out the smaller things towards the front. Isn't that clever? And it's such a simple rule to have.
And sure enough,
there we are.
Look, we've learned something already.
Actually, the biscuits are hidden. She'd marked me down for that. Look, the digestive biscuits are hidden at the back. Never mind.
Peter, while you're pouring, you may have overheard me in the kitchen talking about some of your productions. We're looking at them right now.
I make it a habit never to listen to compliments.
No.
But maybe you weren't complimenting me.
I wasn't actually, but I probably will be complimentary later on. Which of your productions either gave you the greatest pleasure, or which are you proudest of?
Oh, that's an impossible one. I mean, they're all they all have a place in my heart for different reasons. So there are some which made money, not for me, but for the producers. There are some which were great fun to work on. So it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult. And how do you compare, a farce with Macbeth? You can't really.
And indeed, a jukebox musical, and we'll be getting onto that as well later in the show. Peter, this is horrifying news, I'm sure, but we've known each other for something like 40 years, yes.
It is actually, and I remember the occasion that we met.
Why do you think we get on?
Because we both have a sort of magpie mentality. We don't like to exclude things. I find a lot of, obviously a lot of younger people don't like old stuff, but a lot of older people don't like new stuff. And we may not like it all, but you've got to dip into it. Otherwise, you're not part of the public conversation.
You've got to be aware of it.
Yes. I mean, there are all sorts of things about contemporary culture that I don't like, but I still sample them.
I'm delighted to hear it. I'm going to put some milk in my tea, Peter, while I tell viewers that you were brought up in Dagenham.
I was.
And after drama school, you made, if not your TV debut, but a very early TV appearance in Claudius. I've heard about this production for so long. I've never had the pleasure of it. Can you tell me what your involvement was in I, Claudius, or as Frank Muir used to call it, I, Clavdivs?
I thought you'd seen it. I thought everyone had seen it.
No.
Well, that's extraordinary. Well, you've seen the series. You obviously just forgotten my moment of fame.
I didn't watch the series because I was on tour.
Oh, this is like when I worked with Fenella, and we had a line in a play which mentioned the Falklands War, and she said, "I'm nervous about doing this line because I don't want to be politically controversial." And I said, "Well, this line isn't controversial." And she said, "Well, the thing is, I know nothing about the Falklands because I was at Chichester at the time." But anyway,
a likely story.
So I, Claudius. Anyway, the assistant director, I think he was, whose name I've sadly forgotten, came to see a production at my drama school, and then got me in to play a small part of Claudius's slave.
Oh, excuse me, Peter.
What?
Enslaved person.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Is that what we have to call them?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Oh, this is new to me. Oh my God. Well, they'd have to change all the credits on the programme. When did this happen?
I know you like to know these things, Peter. I'm here just to keep you up to date.
An enslaved person. Why?
Yes.
I mean, slave isn't gender specific, is it? So
let's not get into this so early in the show, Peter, although it may come up later. So you were, I'm told, enslaved.
I was enslaved to Derek Jacobi's Claudius. And for those who don't know, other ignorant people who haven't seen the series, like Mr. McGillivray, the Emperor Claudius had a terrible stammer, and it's not terribly relevant to this, but anyway, I was his enslaved person, and he came into the house and said, he didn't say anything. I said to him, your wife, the Mistress Apicata, is here and wishes to speak with you. And Claudius turned to me and said, my wife, what does she want? And I said, well, how should I know? She's not my wife.
And that was it.
That was it. I originally...
Sorry, Peter, it's the equivalent of your carriage awaits, my lord.
Oh, I think it's a bit more than that, because it's a big laugh line. It was my first ever laugh. Oh no, actually it's not true, because I'd done a season in Rep at Swansea, and I appeared in a farce, which was very funny, and which I was very funny. But anyway, I loved that line. When I read the script, I thought, it's only 2 lines, but it's the funniest line in the episode. And it was, the scripts for I, Claudius were very witty.
Well, quite a good writer, I understand. Robert Bolt, was it?
Robert Graves.
Robert Graves. You see, at my age, I tend to make a few mistakes as well.
Don't bolt for the grave.
Very good. Now, I saw a production of yours. It wasn't that long after I, Claudius. You went straight into the West End, so to speak, with your production of the Satiricon. And there's the poster.
It is.
I beg its pardon. It's just Satyricon. I've never read this to you before, Peter. It's my diary entry for May the 23rd, 1981.
Oh, my God.
It's the night I saw Satyricon. You're not going to like... I'm glad you're laughing now.
I've memorised the bad reviews, but anyway, let's hear yours.
Sorry about this, Peter, but honesty is the best policy. I had to get a taxi to the Phoenix Theatre, I was late, to see a Satyricon. You've got to bear in mind, I didn't really know Peter at this time, so I could be completely honest. The most wonderful flop since Troubadour. Don't know whether you remember that show.
I saw Troubadour, and how dare you?
They were giving out tickets for Troubadour at the stage door. Originally seen at Theatre Space last year, you see, I'd done my research. It's a piece of low camp, which uses a jock-strapped cast in a cheapskate locker room set. Oh, I can't go on, Peter.
All I can say is that Peter Porter, the distinguished poet, reviewed us in the Times literary supplement and said it was a pornographic palimpsest, a Menippean satire, and an all-male show of striking ebullience. How's that?
Let's passing on from that. Let's see if I found anything positive to say about this show at all.
My performance in it.
Let's see, shall we? Oh dear, Peter. Tonight, both circles were closed, and of those in the stalls, a noticeable number left at half-time. The cast... it's something positive, Peter. The cast includes the ubiquitous Simon Green, quite good under the circumstances. Oh, what can I say, Peter? But, I mean, it then went to Broadway.
Off-Broadway.
Wow.
But off-Broadway. And we two theatres. We played in one for a season, and our booking finished, and we immediately got booked into another off-Broadway theatre. So we started at the Carter Theatre and we moved to the Actors and Directors Studio.
And did the critics like it better in New York?
One of the critics said that I should be run out of town, preferably on the third rail. I didn't know what the third rail was, but apparently it's the electrified one.
Oh, well, that makes sense then, yes.
Yeah. But anyway, the audiences loved it there, and we kept it in a smaller space there, because in London it had started on the Fringe in a tiny Fringe theatre, and it just didn't work in the Phoenix Theatre because it didn't belong in a big proscenium arch, in a theatre that holds over 1,000 people. So we scaled it back, and then it worked again.
Well, I must have met you shortly afterwards, round about the time of another of your productions, and look, there's the poster. It's the Jew of Malta. And we met because we were both using the same actress, the late Jennifer Lautrec. She was touring with me in my theatre company, and Jennifer was in your production as well. Now, what do you remember of that?
What, of the Jew of Malta?
Yes.
What can I say? I was the first person ever to use video in a stage production, I believe, in the West End. It was the first major revival of the Jew of Malta in 25, 30 years. I think Eric Porter had done it at the Royal Shakespeare Company. It was a modern dress, well, more than modern dress, it was slightly futuristic, the production. And in fact, when the Jew died at the end, he wasn't thrown into a giant vat. He was fried in a microwave.
Oh, were the critics kinder?
Again, they varied. They varied. Sort of raves in the Guardian and other papers, and I remember Jack Tinker hated it, but then he hated me.
Well, after that,
I've always courted controversy. I've never been.
It's another reason we get on.
As history has proved, I've always been slightly ahead of the curve. There I was. One of the things that got me slated on the first night of the Jew of Malta was that we were too ambitious technically, and so the video, we didn't have live video. We didn't have a live video stream. Such things didn't exist. What we did was we had a recording of somebody being interviewed, and the person on stage was communicating with this television set, and of course, sod's law, it went wrong on the first night. There were lots of little things like that, and when the Guardian came on the second night, and the Guardian reviewer actually rang me up and said, I obviously saw a different show. He said, what on earth went wrong on the first night? There were sliding doors that jammed, all sorts of things. Too ambitious. But again, I'll point out that people talk about Hamilton being, the great sort of rap innovation. 1988, I did a rap production of Romeo and Juliet with black Montagues and white Capulets. Again, set slightly futuristic, and the actor Don Gillet played the prologue and Benvolio, and rapped, two households both alike in dignity, if ever all know where we late are seen. And Queen Mab was rapped, so
as
ahead
you
of its time.
say, ahead of the curve,
People were
Peter.
horrified at the time.
And only now have they come to love it.
Yes.
Now, we then lost touch for a short while, and you went
About
off...
20 years.
Yes. You went off and did something I've heard a lot about. It was 2 national tours of something called Naked Flame. Tell us what it was.
Oh, well, before Naked Flame, there was Guards, the Terry Pratchett.
There's the poster behind you, Peter.
Yeah, Terry... all due to the foresight of the wonderful late Michael Lias of Wimbledon Theatre, because I'd done several things at his open air season, and he said, "Have you ever read any Terry Pratchett? I think it could work on stage." And so we my partner Jeff Cush read a couple of the books, and he said this one would work, and nobody had ever done it in a full-scale professional stage production, and we toured that for 2 years, and it was a huge success. And as a result of that, because it was such an expensive show, because it was so lavish with a revolving set and huge trucks and a big cast, the producers said, "Can't you come up with something that's less expensive to tour with one set?" Blah blah blah. Anyway, and then I came up with the idea of...
There's the poster. It's Naked Flame. It seems to involve naked firemen. Peter, let's get onto that.
Yeah. Well, they weren't actually naked. There was a few flashes of bare backsides, but it was the idea was to subvert the farce genre. And so instead of having sort of dolly birds being chased around by middle-aged or even elderly comic actors, the idea was to have some nice-looking firemen, and there's a single female character who is the sort of catalyst for the plot, the MacGuffin.
This was a token female, yes, but this was an absolute triumph, wasn't it?
It was indeed. We toured that for 3 years, was it? Yes, 2000, 2001, 2002. Yeah, 3 years we toured that for. All over the country, huge theatres. And in some of the theatres, it was such a huge success, they said, "Can we have a sequel?" So when we did the final tour, I quickly knocked up a sequel, which was basically the same show, but one of the characters was made into an Australian and one was made into a German. And
why not? Now, we spoke
and
earlier.
people said, "Oh, it's so different to the first one."
I'm sure. Yes, we spoke earlier about multimedia, and I want to talk about this production. Especially because something went wrong, and I'm not quite sure what it was. It was your production of The Tempest with Victor Spinetti.
Well, 2 things were at fault, really. It was the concept was that Prospero, who is marooned on an island in Shakespeare's play, would actually be marooned on an island which had been used as a research facility for chemical warfare. And so he was there alone, and all of the abandoned equipment was on the island with him, which involved lots of CCTV. So the concept was that Prospero would be alone on stage, and he would be watching and manipulating all the other characters via the CCTV.
But
firstly, the very clever young film director who I managed to rope in to do the film footage was a bit too arty. It didn't really look like CCTV. It looked more like a Kenneth Anger movie. That caused a bit of problem, because it then made it more difficult for Victor Spinetti, who was not a young man, he was 80 by this point, to relate to what was happening on the screen, because he couldn't see what people were doing, or he couldn't hear what they were saying. This made it even harder for him to remember his lines. We did have a famous meltdown on stage on the third day of previews, where Victor stopped in the middle of one of the big speeches towards the end. He froze. There was a very long silence, and he said, "It's no good. I can't go on. No, that's it." And somebody who had helped him learn his lines, who I'd paid to run his lines with him, called out from the audience, "It's all right, Victor." And Victor said, "No, it's not all right. It's a disaster." And there was an even longer agonizing silence. And then he said, "Oh, fuck it, I'll carry on." And he picked up from exactly the point that he'd stopped and sailed through to the end of the play with no trouble. But I aged 10 years that night, and the following day I said, I'm going to put this production on hold until we have time to rethink and re-rehearse it. And we never ever did make it to a press night.
Peter, I knew this would happen. We've got so many other things to talk about, but we've come up to the halfway point in the show. So we're going to take a brief break to see a trailer for a new Peccadillo movie. And it's brand new. It's out today on DVD and video on demand. It's called Boy Meets Boy. Have a look at this and then join us in a couple of minutes.
What do you do?
What I do?
Yeah.
I dance.
Really?
And I deliver food by bike, okay?
I don't want to see.
What?
Do you dance?
No.
Come on, like, I might never ever see you.
I'm not dancing.
Just do it, like,
Leave me alone.
come on, just do it. I know you want to. The most important things in life is to be able to do whatever you want, or to be with who you want to be.
So why then don't you do whatever you want?
I don't know what I want to do.
Next.
You know, honestly, I scare myself sometimes. I go to work and I sleep with a random guy, and it satisfies me for like 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then I just feel disgusting.
Love between two persons, it gets possessive, hard, it's painful, you know? You connect that to everything in your complete life, and you end up also thinking of the possibility that this could last forever. You know what I mean?
Why did you tell me this after spending 10 hours with me?
I just didn't find the right moment. I'm sorry.
Great.
It's Harry Monroe. Well, hello, nice to meet you, Mr. Harry Monroe. I'm your biggest fan.
Nice to
An
meet you.
autograph?
No, you can't have an autograph.
That's a Boy Meets Boy. This is David McGillivray, and I'm with my special guest, Peter Benedict. Boy Meets Boy is out today. And as you saw, it's about a Brit meeting a German in Berlin. I think it's going to appeal to those of you who remember another brilliant Peccadillo release Weekend. And in the break just now, Peter, you recalled another production of Boy Meets Boy.
Well, I don't think it's the same as that film, but there was a musical called Boy Meets Boy, which was in the Carter Theatre in New York shortly before I arrived to launch the New York production of Satyricon. How's that for a tie-in?
Well. Just before the break, we were talking about your production of The Tempest. It was followed by something I mentioned right at the top of the show, a jukebox musical. The subjects were the Monkees. It was called Monkey Business. How on earth did that come about?
Again, one of those things where you think, what marvellous band that's got a great playlist hasn't been turned into a jukebox musical? And I loved the Monkees when I was growing up, and I went and bought a set of CDs to play through the complete works of the Monkees. And of course, they had the most fantastic writers working, well, not for them, but writing the music for the TV series. Carole King and Jerry Goffin, get them the right way round. Neil Diamond, Harry Nilsson.
Good tunes.
Yeah, and they wrote some themselves, of course, as well. And the thing is, of course, they weren't a band. They were actors playing the members of a band. And it was just fortuitous that all of their tracks became great hits. And they outsold the Beatles and the Rolling Stones combined. I think it was 1968.
Astonishing. Yeah. Alas, the show never came into London's West End.
No, it's a sad story. I mean, it could still happen, but without going into too much detail, there were co-producers, and the co-producers didn't really agree on the direction the show should take. I was not directing the show, I was merely the writer, and this was the first time in my entire life that I realised what it's like being a writer, because you have no say in anything. And so the casting happens in front of your eyes, to your and sometimes to your dismay, but it's anyway. There were too many conflicts between the producers, and it didn't quite gel, even though it did get good reviews. But it was never going to happen.
Bloody producers. Now, in talking of producers, I am one, and in 2015 I produced a scandalous short film called Trouser Bar. You may have heard of it. And for this film, I required a number of actors to stand outside a shop in London's King's Cross and look in the window of the shop and appear to react to what was going on inside. Why on earth did you say yes to this low-paid role, Peter?
Oh, because I'll do anything to get my face in front of a camera.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Peter, because obviously, the camera was often behind these actors' heads as they looked in the window, so you only saw the backs of their heads, with the exception of Peter Benedict. Every time there's a shot outside the shop, Peter is doing that. Absolutely outrageous.
These shots didn't make it into the final cut, otherwise I would have noticed them.
What's fun about that film, Peter, is that these poor actors were outside the shop for so long that they all got to know each other, and they're still friends today.
Yes.
I love putting people together.
Oh, same as me.
Well, a lot of these actors are going to come up in conversation, not right here on Little Did You Know, but on Patreon. Now, Patreon subscribers can join us at the end of the show. They'll find us waiting for them. If you're not a subscriber, here's the link. Please become one of us. From Trouser Bar, we move swiftly, Peter, to what you've been doing more recently, and that is you've become one of the most outstanding producers of actors' memorials. I didn't expect this development in your career.
It's very strange.
Isn't
it's very
it?
strange and slightly sinister.
Tell us about the star-studded gathering that you managed to get together for the aforementioned Victor Spinetti.
Well, for Victor's, the thing is, if you've got someone who's a star, it's easy to get other stars to come and turn up and do a turn at their memorial. In fact, you're spoiled for choice because everyone wants to show they're available for work. So it's a good way of reminding people if you haven't been seen for a while. So for Victor, who did we have?
Well, there's one very big name indeed.
Can
we talk about him?
End of the list. Well, anyway, we started with Rob Brydon, but anyway, it moved on through Ronnie Corbett, who had been locked in the toilet, and we had to rescue him. But anyway, the surprise for me, as well as everybody else, was that Paul McCartney, who was one of the guests at the memorial, Of course, Victor had appeared in all 4 of the Beatles movies, the only person to do so. And he suddenly decided he would get up and do a personal tribute at the last minute. So it was not scheduled, it wasn't in the order of service, but he got up, and it was great. It was a lovely moment, and really put the icing on the cake.
And yes, I was there, so now I have a Sir Paul McCartney story. How about that? We're going to move on to The Wrong People. And this story goes back to about 1972. I was working for a director called Pete Walker, and his old mate, the former Hollywood star Sal Mineo, was in London trying to set up a film of Robin Maugham's The Wrong People. And at the same time, the book came out in paperback. So I thought,
snap.
Oh, wait a minute, because we've got light shining on that and we can't see it. Now, hang on, Peter, because we're just going to have a look at that. There it is. So I bought the paperback and I thought, this is a fantastic story. Now you, Peter, must have discovered The Wrong People at the same time. What was your reaction to that book?
Well, to be honest, I hadn't read the book. I read what you had written, and then...
No, I'm going back to 1972, and at that time I hadn't written a word.
No, I hadn't read it in 1972. You've forgotten this. I said to people, have you heard of this thing that David McGillivray is talking about called The Wrong People? And 2-3 different people I mentioned it to said, oh my God, it's a brilliant book. You must read it. It's fantastic. And it's one of those books that, I know it's now been republished, but it's sort of been lost for the last 20, 30 years to public consciousness.
I didn't know this, Peter. You bought the same copy of the book, but much later.
Yes, much later.
Well, after I read the book in, as I say, 1972, I forgot all about it. And then we have to skip 40 years to when I was at a book launch at London's Gaze the Word bookshop. And there on the shelf was another interesting book, this one. And we've got enormous trouble with the light here. So I'm just going to do that so that you can get a very good look at Sal Mineo's biography. I picked it off the shelf and I thought, I wonder if The Wrong People is mentioned. And sure enough, it was. It was so interesting that I read my copy of The Wrong People again and thought, I'm going to direct this film myself. It was extremely difficult. I couldn't buy the rights for various reasons. And this is where Peter Benedict comes back into the story. It's an extraordinary coincidence, but Peter, what happened?
What happened was David said to me, I cannot get hold of these damn rights. The agent seems to be dragging her heels. And I said, who's the agent? And David told me, and I said, I know someone who's her best friend. So I made a phone call. Next thing I know, David said, she's pulled her finger out, and she's now saying she would love to help get the rights for me. However, she now is having difficulty communicating with the person who is the what do you call it? The beneficiary of Robin Maugham's estate.
Executor.
And so there were delays again. And I said to David, well, who is the executor? And David said, it's his nephew, a chap called, I can't remember, William something. And I said, not William Lawrence. David said, well, yes, how did you know? And I said, well, I knew a William Lawrence 40 years ago, and he mentioned Robin Maugham to me a couple of times and said he was clearly a close friend, and it always stuck in my mind. So I wrote to William Lawrence, care of the agent, and said, my friend David McGillivray is trying to get the rights to this bloody book. Do you remember me? And he wrote back immediately and said, yes, of course I remember you, let's meet. And the rest is history. David now has the rights.
To cut a long story short, I think it was a matter then of weeks before we signed the contract. So Peter, it is all because of you. Now, I was trying to get a director to direct The Wrong People, and I wasn't having much luck. And then, I mean, at this point, shall we mention The Witch of New Mexico?
No.
Why not? Because she'll never see this. And anyway, we're not going to say anything libelous, but it led on to the next development in The Wrong People story.
Well, somebody else had their eye on the book, but of course she didn't own the rights. I think she sent the agent a script to say, oh, look, I've written a marvellous script. And David read the script and then showed it to me and said, what do you think? And I said, well, it's a bit strange and it's nowhere near as good as yours. Why on earth are you bothering to give it the time of day? And that was that really.
Well, this woman who indeed is a witch and does live in New Mexico was very honest. She wanted to direct the film, but she said that she had no filmmaking experience whatever. And so I thought, well, maybe you're not quite ready for a feature then. Why don't you go off and do a short? That was basically the end of that. But I then got on the 65 bus and I had an epiphany. And I said, I'm going to direct this film myself. And I came round to Peter Benedict and I sat in this very chair I'm sitting in now. And I said, Peter, will you rewrite my script for me? Why did you say yes?
Well, because I loved the project. I loved the book. I liked your script. I think when I first read it, which at this point had been, 6 months, a year before, whatever, I said how much I loved it. And I think I probably made a few observations about things that I thought could possibly be clearer. And I suppose you thought that I'd be a good script doctor, whatever. And I was saying to someone only this morning, it's a hell of a lot easier to be a script doctor than it is to write a script. And you'd written a very good script with a very clear narrative. And I thought my contribution could simply be to be a fresh outside eye on it and to say we could trim this and put this in.
Well, Peter is in fact very good at construction, and that's why it's a far better script now than it was. We went ahead with what was going to be a script reading. We got together a very exciting cast, we got a venue, and then what happened?
COVID. the lockdown happened literally the day of the reading was scheduled. The lockdown began, I think, on the Saturday that the reading was supposed to happen. We'd had rehearsals for the reading, at which I'd told everyone they had to wash their hands, and we had sanitizer everywhere. But people were beginning to get a little nervous,
to say the least. So. Again, stymied, but we did put the reading on Zoom eventually, and principal photography is now scheduled for 2022.
Hurrah!
Peter, how are you feeling? Cautiously optimistic?
Oh, yes. Forget caution. I've never been interested in caution. I don't think you have either. It will happen next year, come hell or high water. It's a project that is demanding to be done.
Why?
Because it's a fantastic book and a fantastic story. And as far as I'm concerned, films are about stories and stories that grip you to the end. And this does. And it's an unusual story. It's a story set in an interesting period, the mid-60s, when everything was beginning to change in British society, and it's about one man's inability to deal with that change.
But to say that it's not going to be everybody's taste is putting it mildly, no?
I think some people are shocked when they don't take things in context. And it is, for some people, a shocking subject because it is about somebody grooming and trafficking a minor for sex or for sexual purposes. But the person who does this does so because they are compromised and in so many ways blackmailed into doing it. And it's about moral compromise, which is something that everybody experiences at some point in their life to some degree, moral compromise. And I think maybe people need to put the actual subject matter of the sexual aspect of the thing, not to one side, but to see that as just one aspect of the story. It's a fascinating story because it has interesting and exciting locations. It's a witty book and it's a witty script, and it's exciting.
It certainly is. It's a nail biter. You're probably going to want to know more about The Wrong People, and you can find out a lot more because there is a site. It's The Wrong People film.co.uk. Peter, we're coming to the end of this section of the show, although, of course, as I said earlier, we will be continuing this on Patreon. Can you stick around?
I can. I mean, it is my house.
Oh, what a relief. Let's just talk briefly about your plan for the future. And this involves your new skill as a producer of memorials. You've got another one coming up, haven't you?
I have. I've got one coming up in October. And I'd be delighted, David, if you would read at it.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I'd be delighted because the person we'll be celebrating is the actor Peter Stenson. And oh, if he'd lived, I would have had him in The Wrong People.
Yes. Oh, yes. We had him sort of slated for one of the more interesting roles,
Indeed.
I remember.
Tell us about Peter.
Peter was in 3 of my productions. He was in The Jew of Malta. He was in Satiricon and came to New York with it. And he was in the transfer to the Lyric Hammersmith of The Criminal Prosecution and Capital Punishment of Animals by Geoffrey Cush, in which he played the judge. So Peter Stenson.
Also in Doctor Who. We have to mention that because there are so many Doctor Who fans out there.
Oh, yes, he played a Voord. Yes. Which was an early monster, one of the monsters in the very first series.
Is this one of the episodes that's been wiped?
Oh, I don't think so. Our resident Doctor Who expert, Stephen Fennerty, says...
One of your co-stars on Trouser Bar.
Indeed, one of the many wonderful people I met on that shoot. He says you can get it on DVD, I believe. And in fact, Peter Stenson's Voord mask recently went at auction for £1,400.
You're kidding.
Yes.
Peter Stenson, it's a great shame that he's not better known as an actor, but his life will be celebrated where?
At St Paul's, Covent Garden, otherwise known as the Actors' Church.
Can anyone come?
Anyone can come. Just roll up. It's at 4 p.m. on, I think it's a Tuesday, October the 19th at 4 p.m. And some of the people who will be performing are David Brett, who was a member of the Flying Pickets, and Roy North, who was Mr. Roy for Basil Brush, along with some of Peter's closest friends.
Oh, how lovely. Peter, thank you so much. I'm going to stand up again because I know you want to see my face. Join me again at the same time next week when my guest will be the impressionist Anil Desai. Now, he's probably the only Asian impressionist in the UK who does Hollywood stars, and his impressions of Al Pacino and Sly Stallone are well worth listening to. Join me for that in a week's time. Until then, this is David McGillivray saying, mwah! Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Peter.
Bye.